Welcome back to the Masters of Modern podcast. I am your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host, Ben Bateman, Boss Bateman, Ben. Bateman, Boss Bateman.
Yep, that's me. That's exactly who I am. And I'm happy to be here. We're happy to be here talking Magic. It's a big week where you guys are getting this. You guys are getting this about a week after the fact for the reason of our recording schedule, but it doesn't make the impact any worse or different. There was a big time Magic the Gathering announcement last week, and we are here to break the whole thing down. It really does relate to our podcast. This is one of those big watershed moments that if you've been listening to the show for the last year, probably you saw this coming. We talked entirely about this, I think, the previous week.
So if you missed it, or you just haven't been paying attention, or were being too vague, Lurrus was banned in Modern and Pioneer last week. There was a bunch of Pauper bans. I have no opinions on it. There's way more capable creators out there who've done content on what the Pauper bans mean. But most importantly, for this podcast, Lurrus is banned in Modern. The quick thing on Pioneer definitely looks like, because from a Pioneer perspective, it wasn't a dominant force in the format, but a lot of people kind of agreed that this was more of a why ban Lurrus again in 2 years when we're going to need to, and not just rip the Band-Aid off now moment. And that's fine for Pioneer. For Modern, the irony of this banning is literally last week, the episode that came out on Tuesday, ban announcement on Monday, and the ban announcement was a surprise. This was a rare emergency banning where they didn't give any heads up that it was going to happen. We did an entire episode talking about why Lurrus needs to be banned.
And then it was immediately banned.
Yep. And Death Shadow had dominated a tournament, basically in the top 8 of that tournament. And it was a major Modern qualifier invitational thing. There was 6 out of the 8 decks were Lurrus decks. And so it's interesting to see that happen. And then we did a whole breakdown on why that was a problem, what happens. And then now it's banned. We also have in the past, the interesting thing is a lot of content that we've done already, and you can go, and there's going to be links in the description of we did a great episode on which of the other companions could see play that aren't currently, and how you could see play. And I do think we are in a moment where we're going to see that hold true or not true, right? Is the companion mechanic a problem, and is it not? And that's actually the first thing I want to talk about. Do you think this isn't far enough? Do you think they just should have just gotten rid of the companion mechanic entirely in Modern, and instead of just slow rolling, adding a companion next to a companion, Lurrus was just banned, and then in 4 months we're going to hate Yorion, and Yorion's going to be banned, and then in 4 months we're then going to realize that Kahira is just too free for control decks, and then 4 months after that we're going to be the red green one that I'm forgetting the name of because this is tired is just so easy to splash in these decks, and why do they get that free extra card? Let's ban that. Is this a rolling problem when they should just get rid of the mechanic? Or do you think this is it? Do you think Lurrus was specifically and uniquely so much more powerful than the other options, and that those other decks are going to be more easily metagamed against?
I think probably we're okay for a while. My gut tells me the power level of Modern's high enough and aggressive enough that if one of those other companions started to poke through too often and become ubiquitous in the same way, I think the metagame in the format would shift towards beating out those decks, knowing that that's the game plan, is to have the extra card later in the game. If it means aggro is more powerful, so be it. But I don't think that there's a game plan. There's not an inevitability game plan that feels super powerful that involves companions right now that stands out to me. Now, I could be wrong about this, because I do believe, and I've said it on here before, the functional ruling of a companion breaks the rule of Magic. And that's not good. The game has existed for a long time successfully under a very specific set of rules. The idea that you have an extra card you can pay for that's not part of your starting 7 changes the math pretty drastically. I mean, it's a big deal. But I also think that Lurrus was a very very particular card because of the way that it interacts with the type of deck, the type of cheap deck that is ultimately what you would beat companions with. The kind of efficiency that Eternal formats are built around of 1 and 2 drops. So it's possible I'm wrong. My gut right now, though, tells me I don't think any of the other ones are powerful enough that they're going to push over the edge. Maybe the control one, maybe.
So I think Lurrus was this kind of perfect window in companions other than Lurrus kind of ask one of two things. They're either really easy to get to be a companion, but then their power level is low. So you have stuff like Kahira and Gigantha, which require very little from you from a deck building requirement, but then their power level once they're in play is just fine, right? Kahira is a free 3/2 vigilance that like kind of gives some things gives very specific tribal cards +1/+1, and Gigantha comes in for 5 and then can tap for 5 on its next turn, and is just basically mostly being played as a 5-mana 5/5, right? That you get to start the game within your hand, and maybe something in Tron if they're like really in need of it can maybe use the cast Eldrazi on the turn they untap with it. So that's one high, right? Like half the companions fall into that, like, and those are the ones that are seeing the most play in Modern. Are the ones that are like, oh, I just get to play this for free. I get to put Gigantha in any deck I want. And then the other side of that are the ones that have very strict requirements in deck building cost, but then come with powerful engines behind it. That's your Oboshes, right? That's your even Lutri for that. It has a lot of cost to be able to make Lutri work, but then you get like a pretty playable card on the end. That's your Zerdas and your and arguably maybe Yorion. And the thing with Lurrus is that it had both. It was really easy to play in any deck because it's really easy to not have permanents in a format like Modern that are more than 2 mana, right? One drops and 2 drops are a deck that's exclusively that is what I would recommend to a person trying to brew a deck in Modern to begin with. And then on top of that, when it came into play, though, it then created a powerful engine, right? Like it's not like Kahira or Gigantha who they'll come in and like, oh, cool, you got a free creature out of it. Or maybe it's a free creature with a mitigating ability. It's like, oh no, I played this and now I'm going to outvalue you every turn and stabilize against you. And unless you ever, like, even if you have a removal spell, I'll likely draw at least one card off of casting this spell. And I think the only one of these that really feels to me like it's that level of problem is Yorion. Right, Yorion is the other one that it does have a pretty legitimate deck building cost, but it's like debatable, right? Like, is playing a 80 card deck really that big of a deck building cost in a format as wide as Modern, especially when like what I do think is like you like what we did see with Lurrus that Yorion, like the one flaw to Yorion is Yorion isn't good in decks that are linear, right? Unless there's a lot of depth, if you're trying to accomplish a specific task, if you're trying to be an aggro deck or you're trying to combo specific cards together, Yorion gets a lot worse because those are the decks that you really, really want to guaranteed see exactly one card or exactly 2 cards, and Yorion's requirement works against that. Versus every other deck that's just like any type of value pile, any type of like mid-range deck, I think Yorion is as good as Lurrus was, and maybe even better in some cases, which is why Yorion is the second most played one in the format.
Yeah, I think Yorion was the second most played for a reason. I think Yorion's a powerful card to have. The threat itself is a good card. Like it's more of a finisher than say like Kahira is. Obviously, control decks, they're not that worried about the 80 cards versus the 60. We've seen Yorion show up in a bunch of different decks, everything from like the Elementals deck, Rhinos. It shows up obviously in the 80 card control decks. It does feel like the card that they can pay the cost, get into play, and close the game out with the fastest. Whereas like Kahira is like a really, really, really suboptimal finisher for a control deck. It's a cool thing that they have that's kind of cheap to cast, but also like a 3/2. It just on the ground with no ability and no evasion, nothing is like pretty subpar. Now the idea is that a controlled deck doesn't care. Like they don't care what their finisher is. They're happy to do 2 damage a turn to you and just control the game. So that's where like a 3/2 is not that different than like a 4/2 or a 5/2 or a 1/1.
Sure. There's a reason like Mutavault was seeing play in standard control decks that had nothing to do with tribal. It just was like a 2/2 creature that I'm out of resources and my opponent's out of resources, I can use to kill them while I remove their threats is good enough.
But what I will say is that I don't think that control decks that are going to rely on drawing a finisher to kill you once they've taken over the game are actually made that much better by having access to a 3/2 or an 80 card Yorion. I think they're made better, but I don't think it actually alters their game plan as much as people think. I think those decks that have finishers in them will draw the finishers and will just win.
I disagree. And not to say that there aren't control decks that can mitigate that, right? But there's a reason that Snapcaster Mage isn't seeing much play in Modern right now, and it's almost exclusively because of Kahira.
Okay.
Right? Like
Because
the
it's
fact
like
that
such a convenient thing.
like Wafatapo is like the only person I know of that's currently playing Snapcaster Mage as a controlled card in Modern, and like I wish I was good enough to be able to play a control deck that Wafatapo is playing. But the like most of the Azorius control decks are playing that Kahira in the sideboard just because it's such a free roll. If you're unless you're going with the Stoneblade game plan, right? If you're playing a Stoneforge Mystic thing, it's a different conversation. That's the card that actually makes it worth not playing Kahira. But otherwise, you're seeing Kahira show up as control finishers just because it's a free roll. I don't get to play Snapcaster Mage, but I get to play all the good elementals, and I get this free card. And that's like I would not be surprised in 6 months if more Kahiras and Giganthas are seeing play in the format, like across the board. You'll see more of those in a top 8, but Yorion needs to be banned. Because Yorion's deck, I think you just like can put Gigantha in any deck. I've already seen like lists with Grixis Death Shadow just playing Gigantha because for the most part, that deck just gets to play it. I actually believe right now the deck that was the like key deck that was seeing play in the turns we saw is playing no card in it that just doesn't let Gigantha slide into the Lurrus zone. Is that deck want Gigantha in that? Maybe like a 5 mana for a 5/5 or 4/5 is kind of what that deck wants in the sense that it like can now expend its resources to stopping their opponent, protect its small threats, and once it gets beat down in its bad matchups, it now has this like Siege Rhino just sitting on the side.
Yeah, I mean, I do think you make an interesting point, which is that it's like control decks by and large don't care about the quality of the threat; they just care about having access to the threat.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's kind of always been the story. I think Yorion is the card, though. I agree with you. Most likely to get banned. Casting a 5 mana 4/5 flyer like that actually has application, like card advantage application, pretty easily.
Yeah, because it's a 5 mana 4/5 flyer that draws you 5 cards when it comes
like
to play, right?
A bunch of stuff. Yeah, it's like and it's expensive for sure. It costs 5. It doesn't have any haste. You have to untap. Costs 3 to put in your hand. Like that all does exist. But I think that it's the biggest impact. I think the other ones, as you said, may see play, but they feel more to me like they're cards that are going to be part of game plans and make decks better, but not be ubiquitous and unbeatable. They'd be like a part of a deck. They'd be like a thing that a certain style of deck wants to be doing. Whereas the Orion's like a major advantage that you can get that people are already familiar with, that already plays with powerful cards. So I think Yorion's the one that's on the line. But I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say it's DEFCON 4. I'm not worried about it yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's just the closest to Lurrus or Lurrus. We talked about this in the
Lurrus. I think it's just Lurrus.
I don't know how to say that card name, and you're going to put it phonetically in the comment section, and I'm still not going to understand it. So today's Ben. All right, today's trivia game for the
nice.
back to Urion is can you pronounce Lurrus correctly?
I mean, I think so.
As I want you to phonetically type the correct way to put Lurrus, and if you get it right, I'll like it. And if you don't get it right, or if you do get it right, you need to like this episode, and you need to hit that subscribe button, and you need to hit that share button, and just like copy and paste it on your phone. It helps all the algorithm bots love this show, and we get to play fun trivia games. And this one's a little salty because I actually have no idea how to say this card. Everyone says I say it wrong, and I don't know if I can say it right, but I would love to see phonetically how you say it in the comments. Ben, how do you say it?
I believe it's Lurrus.
Okay.
Lurrus.
No,
Lurrus. No, there's no oos. I don't think there's any oos. I think it's Lurrus.
Lurrus?
Wait, stop saying it differently. I think it's nice. I think it's nice and cash. I think it's Lurrus.
You know what's fun? I don't have to say this card's name for a very long time because it's banned in Modern.
Like Lurrus, like rhymes with like no, I keep on thinking of similar words. Lurrus rhymes with like hurt us. Nope. Taurus. Nope. What the hell does Lurrus rhyme with? Lurrus?
Tourists.
Tourist?
I don't know. Yeah. If you can't write it out phonetically, I would be also okay with a word that rhymes with Lurrus. Okay. So back to what I was saying on Yorion. I think my original point is Yorion has a similar incentive plus value engine that Lurrus had, right? It is easy enough thing to build for and gains a significant advantage on it, but its requirement makes it so it doesn't fit into nearly as many decks. It doesn't limit what those decks look like. It does increase card type variety within it. And so I think with those things in mind, it is probably fine because it is a lot easier to punish a Urion deck due to its inconsistency than it was the fact that like Lurrus fit in 17 different deck styles. And so if I were to go to a tournament, it was possible that I would play against a Lurrus deck in every single round with a different deck, but that end game is going to feel the same every single time, which is to me what the real problem with that card was. And
there's like historically been played, I'm just making this number up, but it has to be somewhere in this range, like a billion games of Magic. Probably more. I mean, so many games of Magic.
A very large number, but sure.
Yes, a crazy number. Probably way more than a billion, honestly. It's been around for 25 years. And in those games, if you play 61 cards, it's such an intentional decision. Like, if you are in a constructed format of any kind, playing 61 cards, playing 41 cards in Limited, the agreed upon numbers exist for a reason. They exist because of efficiency. If you're trying to play in a competitive format, the difference of consistency between your 61 card deck and their 60 card deck, it's not like you're going to notice it every game, but over a long period of time, you will. 65 cards, 68 cards, you do notice. 80 cards is definitely a cost. There's not a Blink deck right now that wants to play 70, 75, or 80 cards without Yorion. So playing 80 does matter, right? Like it's not the same thing as Lurrus, where it's like literally the best cards exist and they cost 1 and 2. That's what powerful formats want you to do, is play things that cost 1 and 2. So to do that, right, they're like, hey, play the cheapest things possible, and then you get this inevitability engine that's going to make the best things good anyway. That's where the difference lies, is like the thing you're being asked to do to play a Lurrus deck is not actually playing differently, whereas like that thing is a different thing. I think
I don't know. I tweeted this earlier and last week, and it's kind of like there's this whole idea where like you have to, no matter what, 100% of the time, make sure that your deck is exactly the minimum. You have to be at 40 cards in Limited every time, no matter what. Otherwise, you're bad at Magic. And honestly, if you're at a pre-release or you're just having at a draft at an FNM and you're like struggling with like, oh man, I like, my deck can like probably is like just under the whatever mana curve where like I maybe could go to 16 lands and I'd cut a land, or maybe I'd cut this card and it's like somewhere on the bubble there. Just play the extra card, play the 41st card. That stress is not worth your time for the 0.005 win percentage you would gain on your limited FNM draft environment, or even like any tournament environment to deal with that stress. And maybe you are right. Like, I don't think like, yes, like on a million games, Frank Karsten has done the math, and it is correct to play 40 lands over 40 or 40 cards over 41 cards. But if you're stressing out and you just want to try those cards out and you don't want to, like, don't waste your brain space.
I mean, I've done a lot of, I will be honest, I've played a tremendous number of 41 card limited decks without a doubt, like for exactly the reason that you're talking about. I've also played a decent number of 61 card constructed decks. Like I wouldn't say
very few of that. I've been pretty solid at trying to get that 60 down, but like honestly, at this point, I'm kind of like, why? Sorry, go.
Yeah, no, I've played a good amount of 61 because if I'm building like a brew that I don't know how it works and I've been testing it and coming up with it, often I'll like day before the PTQ or be like, hey, looking at this deck, like I don't want to cut this card. I love this card. Like, and I have to play 2 of those, and I don't want to go down to 1 more land. I'll just play 61. Why not?
And especially in testing, if you're like, oh, I don't know which one of these like 3 removal spells is better, or I don't know if I should be playing this or that. Like, as long as you're not trying to test like how much lands you should play as a percentage, just play 63 cards, add 1 land, add 2 spells, and see what works better. Pick the variety option to try and test stuff out, and then after testing, if you can whittle down like, oh, it ends up that Remand isn't, and I know Remand is an old is a boomer call here, but Remand doesn't actually work. I guess new one, Liliana of the Veil is worse than, which we're going to talk about in a second, is worse than Liliana of Liliana Last Hope, and I tried both of them in this A/B test, and I can cut it now for the tournament. But for testing, be at 64 cards. You'll
do
see
people actually
more
still play
cards.
Liliana of Last Hope? Is that a thing?
Well, we're going to talk about that in a second. That's the next section of the podcast. Stop jumping ahead. So like, to that point, to the fact that I am arguing actively that like people probably don't have to stick to that 60-40 card rule, especially if they're not like winning a pro tour with the which most people are not, and it's fine that you're not. Then like I don't know, if you're not playing a linear deck, if you're playing a control deck or a value deck, in some ways playing up to 80 cards is an advantage. You get to like it's like all of those people that play. I'm a big fan of the control deck that's playing like 18 one-ofs, right? Just like by having all of these different cards and being able to see them with my card draw engine, I'll have the most versatile tools available to me. And that's what playing an 80 card deck is like, right? You're just
And
like,
people,
you're playing
you
with.
like to have variety. I played 80 card rhinos lately, and it's fun, but I don't. The deck didn't feel any different or worse than a normal deck. Granted, I guess I didn't have experience with 60 card rhinos, so
Sure. Right? I mean, that's my point, right? Is like, you're at a point where if it doesn't feel different, then there's not a real cost. Like Urion can be added to most non-linear style decks or non-key pieces to make this deck function style decks. And that's I think the danger of Urion, right? It has the features of Gigantha in the sense that most strategies could probably make Urion work as long as they're playing blue or white, with the danger of Lurrus where the value is so high. And I think that's what people are afraid of. I do think that the strategies that non-linear strategy is a smaller window of possible decks because Modern is a linear format, right? Classically, the best decks in Modern are ones trying to win on a linear access. It's like the complaint of every pro in Magic history with Modern is that it's too many linear decks. There are too many ships passing in the night, and Urion is bad in those decks. And so with that in mind, I do think we're going to see a variety of companions. I just don't know if companion. I don't think getting rid of Lurrus is going to make a companion metagame that it feels like Modern had become go away.
Yeah, I mean that part I agree with you. I think the key thing for anybody who's kind of listening to this debate should focus on if they're trying to figure out like what truly where does this land? Where this lands is that we're still in the world of Magic has always and will always be a game that was founded on a pretty basic system. And these are one of the few times ever that system's been broken. So if they break it and they allow you, and now testing has shown that the cost benefit analysis of playing 14 cards in your sideboard is pretty marginal, people will continue to try to break that. That's why companions were good. They've done tons of things over the years that are powerful. They've added new mechanics, but this is a pretty particular difference. And so I do think you'll see more of it. I do still believe, though, that Lurrus was kind of in a class of his own, of their own.
I agree.
And so we'll see what happens. But if I was like giving on a scale of 1 to 10, what's my concern for companions going forward? I'll ask you the same question. My scale of 1 to 10 of companions going forward, I was at a 10 before the Lurrus banning. I think I'm at about a 4 right now. What do you got?
So I'm probably at a 6. I'm probably a little higher than that.
You're higher than the average. Okay.
Yeah. And kind of to your point on Lurrus before jumping, because that is the next thing I want to talk about is companions as a mistake or not. But I do think one of the other things that Lurrus did that Yorion doesn't, and a lot of the other companions that are going to see play doesn't, is it limited card choice. And that'll be a big part later too of the episode, is like what cards do we now get to play, or what cards are decks going to play moving forward in Modern that they didn't previously, because like playing Hitsuga's Return or whatever is worse than just playing Lurrus in your companion zone. Yorion doesn't have that problem, right? Yorion doesn't say, oh, you can't play with any card. It just says you have to play with more cards, if anything. Some of the other cards do, right? Like we mentioned, Kahira prevents you from playing Snapcaster Mage, right? That's like a limiting factor. Gigantha prevents you from playing any 2-pip mana spell. If like if it ends up the Obosh based Death Shadow decks are better than the Gigantha Death Shadow decks, which are better than the no companion based Death Shadow decks, which are maybe better than the Urion, which are maybe better than the Lutri ones. Like Death Shadow is going to figure its vibe out, and we might get 5 different versions of it, just depending on which companion you want to play. But if we figure that out, I do think Obosh is pretty limiting, right? Like not being able to play with 2-drops cuts out a very large slew of abilities, from Dress Down to Drown in the Lock to Expressive Iteration to Croxa. But otherwise, the deck is playing, just up your Cryptic Colligan's commands, you up your Death Shadows, you up your Dragon Rage Channelers, you play Street Wraith versus Mishra's Bauble. Maybe that deck functions with
I mean, there is something to be said for like power level in a healthy format is balanced, right? Like if you have a balance of power level amongst the meta, the top 10, 12 decks. And if A cancels B and B is better than C, but C is better than A, and that whole dance that everybody does, what eventually happens is deck parity means that when you play a game, like a lot of games will end up with you guys, you do this, I counter that, you get into this, I'm at 7, now we're kind of in top decking mode. And the value of I'm going to pay 3 mana to have an extra card in my hand when you don't have that ability is a pretty powerful thing, because it doesn't matter at that point that you're paying 3 and 5 to cast it. It doesn't matter that you're 9 to draw and cast your Gigantha. Wait, no, not your Gigant. Sorry, 3 and 5. It doesn't matter that it's costing you 8 mana to get a 5/5 in play. If you have it and they don't have it, it's going to change the game. It's going to turn the game, right? So like that's the same technology that we've been leaning into the entire time. It's just a question of how confident are you that what you're playing has enough of an edge over the metagame. You're not going to consistently find yourself in parity top decking situations where you need that, or you're going to lose if they have it. And that's what I think, Lurrus was obvious. I think they all have like arguments in my mind where I could not all of them. That's not true. We did a whole episode on the companions that like we'll never see play. There's like 4 of them that'll never see play. But like the other 4,
4. I think
Zerda's never going to see play. I think the green black one's never going to see play.
I think Zerda could see play. I think the right card needs to be printed for Zerda to see play that doesn't currently exist.
Because of the ability. Sure.
Yeah. Like the make 2 things less. There could just be a combo deck that like, oh, if I have Training Grounds or Zerda, I win the game. And the moment that happens on a card that's like, fine.
That's fair. But I guess the point is the likelihood of the bottom 3 or 4 is low. It's really just a question of the next 3 or 4 that all have like practical application. And so my gut feeling, and I think your assessment at 6 is it could be fair. It's probably pretty measured. I just think Modern as a format right now is super powerful. And like, granted, it's just a question of like that super powerful format can still have these cards applied to those powerful archetypes. And then that's the problem.
Yeah, I also think that Companions created Companions along with Modern Horizons 2 created, and 1 to some extent, created a perfect storm of slowing the format down, which I think is a net benefit. Don't get me wrong. Like, I am here to argue that the fact that Modern was slowed down by these cards kind of being combined is a good thing. But the amazing removal between the elementals and prismatic ending, printed in Modern Horizon 2, plus Force of Negation and Force of Vigor for Modern Horizons 1, plus added to giving every deck in the format a late game engine that they can removal themselves towards, I think has been a collective, the force to make Companions really, really popular in the format, right? Like it's, I can very easily build my deck now, no matter which color combo I am, to get to a later game state. And now Companions, even with the companion tax, becomes so valuable.
And here's a question I have for you on that note. Mm-hmm. I think we talked about this on the other episode. Like, is there a cost? Because it's parallel, right? If you change all the companions to have the same bad cost, like it's the same exact situation for every one of them, which is that like if one is playable, then they all have the same risk of being playable for the same reason. Sure. But like, if they cost 6 to put in your hand, do you think they would be completely off the table, or do you think they would still all be in consideration for the exact same reason?
I think the more tax you add, the lower the quantity of decks that get access to them will play them, right? Like you do limit, but I think like Yorion decks probably still just play Yorion.
Right, because if you have the mana to pay, and it's one turn, it's still one turn.
And the Kahira decks absolutely still just play it. And I mean, I think it's worse, right? Like it's definitely not as good, but it's still a free roll where you get a 9 mana 3/2 vigilance that gives your elementals +1/+1.
It's just an interesting thought, because what it exposes, the deeper you go down that rabbit hole. What if they cost 10 to put in your hand? Like the deeper you go down the rabbit hole, the more you realize that this is not about power level. It's about the fundamental game break.
And that is the next thing I want to talk about. Is Companion the most broken mechanic ever printed?
I think we had this conversation a month ago, and I think we were both kind of in the camp of like probably. I'd have to roll the tape.
It's Companion versus Dredge versus Storm versus Delve. Those are the 4.
I think that sounds right. Right? Storm and Dredge, Delve, Companion. I don't think Affinity, because for the most part, Affinity like wasn't pushed in the same way. Like the actual wording Affinity Artifact is like different.
Yeah, I think the lands ended up being the actual net negative with affinity then.
Yeah, I mean, like mechanic or keyword. Is there anything else that like is like super? I mean, I'm just looking. I have the modern, the modern ban list in front of me here. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else that I'm forgetting.
Yeah, I don't think there is. I think I think those are the four, right? Like, because I think if they printed more delve spells and they still are broken, right? Hogak broken, Murktide Regent extraordinarily powerful. They printed more storm cards the second time, right? The first time they printed storm, then the second time was like gut shot and stuff like that. Still extremely powerful. They've only printed one dredge card since they printed dredge. There's only been maybe two additional ones. I think it's just the red one though. And this is a white one I don't know about, and I would love a white dredge card. But and companion, which they haven't printed new ones, but yeah, I like don't think I think companions
probably the fifth one. I would say the straggler in this conversation that is not. I think it would be fifth, but I think Phyrexian Mana is the fifth because it's.
I would agree with that.
You look at the list here, and it's like Birthing Pod is banned, Gitaxian Probe is banned, Mental Misstep is banned. There's another one on here. I think there's like 4 or 5 on the list that all have the Phyrexian Mana cost. I mean, I like looking at it again and thinking about specific cards. You can go down that road, but I think in terms of mechanics that have multiple instances, I think it's probably Phyrexian Mana is the fifth one. I think it's fifth. I think like all the other ones you mentioned. Okay, Dredge is legal. There's one dredge card, like a really incredible dredge card that has had like a spotty history with modern, and it's the thing that has, gone in and out. Made dredge better. Dredge is still good. Storm has had like multiple cards banned, but it's rarely the storm cards that get banned. It's like the enablers that keep storm viable.
Which I have argued in the past was the mistake, right? Like I have argued that gut shot should not be legal in modern, but sure.
I think like delve in general is like, because anything that's free is like in general is sort of the problem. Like if the cheaper you can make powerful things, the more free you can make powerful things, the bigger problem.
Right. I think delve is the second most powerful mechanic on this list. Like I think it's companion followed by delve, followed by Phyrexian Mana, followed by dredge, followed by storm, and that's partially based on card quality, right? But like delve seems impossible to cost correctly, as does Phyrexian Mana, and they both function very similarly. Storm, you can make storm cards that aren't good. They're just boring, right? Dredge is more about the dredge number next to it. And as long as you don't make a dredge 6 card ever again, and you keep everything like dredge 3 or like, because Life of the Loam is fine, right? If dredge was just Loam and Golgari Thug and the -1/-1 dredge card, and dredge never got above 3, dredge 3, I think dredge would not be on this list. It's just the fact that dredge 5 and dredge 6 exist on 2 cards makes it broken.
Yeah, I think probably if I was going to lean into which of the two mechanics is the most broken ever, it's got to be companion. So I agree with you. Yes, the answer to your question is
especially as originally printed, right?
Is companion the most broken mechanic of all time? My answer is yes, and the reason is because of what you just referenced, which is that the original design of the mechanic is so stupid busted. That's one of those things where like. I think about all the time spent designing them and how excited the people behind it probably were, and all the time I know they spend testing for standard. I think about all of that and how like I know the people that do this, they're friends of ours, are good, some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. Like these are brilliant people. And it is still staggering to me that sometimes even the smartest minds who are the most familiar in the world with the game can still get fooled into thinking something is not a problem, which is crazy. Like it's just how elusive this actually can be sometimes. Like we talk about card balance and power quality all the time, and I feel like we have a decent handle on it, but like nobody really does, because this can still happen to the guys that make the game.
Well, I think they were beholden by Brawl.
Right.
I think they looked at a format like Commander and Brawl and Brawl and Arena, and we're like, Brawl's fine. We once in a while have to ban a Commander, but Brawl as a format is not much worse or better than Standard. And fans love Commander, right? Like people like Commander is the most popular format. How do we bring that Commander experience and bring something like it into Standard and Modern and whatever? And that was the decision behind it, right? And they were operating under, if Commander is fine, this is fine. What they didn't remember is that not every deck gets a companion. So you're now creating a format where every deck needs to pick one of 10. If they had said Modern now has commanders, every legendary creature can be your commander, I don't think this is a problem. I think
Well,
that's
yeah, I mean
fine. I
that's
think if
definitely true.
right,
Yeah, that's definitely true.
I think they it totally changes the format. I think it totally warps what everything looks like. But if they're just like legendary creatures can now be your commander in Modern tomorrow and in Standard tomorrow, we're just fully jumping in on Commander, which is a cool format, by the way. That sounds fun, but we're jumping into that. Whatever. I don't think it's as problematic as Companion because Companion's so limited.
Yeah.
You can only play with these exact 10, and so you have to you warp formats to be that. Versus the variety, if anyone got a Commander, decks would be really consistent, but like there are different cards that would need to be banned, like Kiki Jiki probably. But like I think that it's fine, which I think is interesting. So should Wizards get rid of the companion mechanic?
I think because of there's
Should it go
several
the way
reasons. I
of
think my
mana burn?
answer. I think my answer right off the bat. There's a couple reasons why the answer is no. If they were going to do it, I would have preferred they did it when they changed the rule in the first place. I would have just preferred they did it cleanly then. There's been versions of these cards printed that have the new text on them now. Like I think like Lurrus had like a judge promo or something like that, if I recall.
It was a dual deck,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, like that.
Like,
So it's weird.
it was a precon.
I think like going now and swiftly banning all of them and like just getting rid of them forever it's a little presumptuous to assume that the experience based on this one card is going to have this warping of an effect, because I do think that even though it does fundamentally change the game, it sort of breaks the rules. I also think that when you're dealing with the powerful formats, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of optionality of how you build a deck, and there's also a lot of metagame. Like there's a lot like when a deck shows up for 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time, and it's got one card in it that everyone's like, this is so good. Sometimes the card gets banned. Other times, most decks are playing the card, and then the format reacts, and 3 months later, no one's playing the card, or very few decks are. And like we've seen this over the years. That's the concept of the metagame. So,
but I do think these cards function differently because you can build a deck to not need this companion and just have it for free.
No,
right?
100%. Like, I understand that it is different, but I think when you ask the question of should they be banned now, no, I don't think they should be banned now. We went down the road of changing the rules in the first place. That means that there was enough energy, time, thought, and testing put into the decision to change the rules when they made that decision that they saw a future in which at least some of these could work. I can't imagine this would actually completely blow my mind. I can't imagine they made the decision to change the rule without significantly testing and discussing it. I think there has to have been like a pretty hefty amount of research to alter the rules that fast after printing. So there's got to be something they know that we don't know that still holds somewhat true, which is why I don't think that it's you don't think so?
This is a nuclear option, right? They don't want to do this. Everything I can do to not have to make this happen is worthwhile, right? Deleting a rule that they put on cards entirely has not been done before this targeted, right? It's not like now on the reverse end, there hasn't been many mechanics like Companion. Dungeons is an example of them, I guess, that like added a rule to the game, right? It's not like mana burn, which is an example of a ability, or damage on the stack, which is examples of abilities in the rules that cards relied on that they changed, and then those cards no longer worked the same way. That's different than all dredge doesn't work anymore. We just got rid of the mechanic. We're banning it. Companion does function in a way that did modify the rules specifically in a way so inherently that getting rid of it seems possible. Like I don't think I think it is comparable to getting rid of mana burn as far as the rules go. It's just like, the companion no longer works.
I mean, here is the other part of companions, by the way. Just to like devil's advocate my own opinion here, which is that like, yeah, there's one dual deck version of Lurrus that exists. Otherwise, that these are cards that we know because we are in the space all the time how they work, but a new player that looks at these cards doesn't. It's like a bizarre change that exists that we all have to be aware of to keep each other accountable. But Magic's not played all the time by experts in shops. It's played often by people who go to a store, they buy a box of what's there, right? Or they like, that's just how it works. They pick up cards, they learn how to play based on what's on the card. They're kitchen table players, and these cards are bizarre. They're bizarre cards that are intended to be exciting when you open them. So you look at them and you read them, and you're like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to play this way. And then someone's like, hey, that doesn't work the way you think it
Yeah,
works.
it costs 3 mana. Now the difference between, that now costs 3 mana to do that, which you have to look up and feels like cheating, but people have their phones, that's a thing you can now do, is different than, that card doesn't do that at all anymore. That rule was deleted from the game. Now, one is cleaner. The 3 mana thing sounds like I'm cheating. Right? Like, hey, they added this arbitrary number now, and it now works totally differently. It goes into your hand, and then you can cast it later. That is a different mechanic than,
I mean,
hey, they got rid of that part of the game. It was too good. They got rid of it. That's like a lot cleaner from like in the classic, like, kitchen table person who knows the rules better than the other one always sounds like they're cheating perspective, right?
I mean, like, what's funny about it is that if you get rid of companion as a keyword in Magic, you're like, hey, these are legendary creatures that exist, but they are no longer companions. They're just legendary creatures.
Mm-hmm.
You would still have them all be legal, though. Like, I could play a Lurrus commander deck.
Yeah. In fact, it unbans Lutri, right? Like, Lutri gets unbanned. I mean, so here's so two sides of this. One, I think that the companion mechanic in Commander is phenomenal. I think it is extraordinarily fun in that format. I think it would be more fun if you got rid of the 3 mana tax. Like, I think the old version of Companion is perfect for that format, and I would love for it to go back to how it used to be.
Wait, how does Companion work in Commander?
Same as it does in Modern.
It's 100 card number 101.
It's card 101. Yeah, it's the only one that goes over the 100 limit. You get
it's an extra card.
It's an extra card. You follow the rules. You have to do all the things. So, like, I have a Obosh Jund commander deck with Rayhan and Jessica as the commanders. There is no card in that deck that is not 1 mana, 2, 3 mana, 5 mana. You're right. They all follow the even odd rule. I have a Lurrus deck that's Mardu that I'm turning into not green because of the new secret layer Stranger Things cards that can play with Lurrus in the companion zone. No 2-drops will be, no 3-drop permanents will exist in the deck, right? That you can play with them in the same way. So in that format, they're amazing. The deck building restrictions are so much more limiting in Commander, and on top of the color requirement, makes it entirely a whole different deal than it does in Modern. It has the reverse effect in Commander that it has in Modern, where any deck that's playing black or white can play Lurrus, which is like, 3/4 of the entire format. In Commander, it's like, no, only exactly blue-black decks can play it, meaning that it's like 1/10 of the, 1/10 of the format. So that is but they can't be used as your commander. Lutri is currently banned because Lutri's requirement is just the deck building requirement of Commander. And so if Lutri was legal, every single Commander deck that was playing a combination of blue, red, or more should, not just would, but is incorrect to not just have Lutri in the companion zone.
It's an extra card that is like, it's literally card 101 in any blue or red deck in Commander.
Every one of those players gets to start the game drawing one extra card every game, no matter what, with no restriction added to their deck, right? It's like, that would be bad. And it's a good card, right? It's not like Kahira, where, like, I guess, like, it's not hard for every green-white deck to play Kahira if they really wanted to. So here's where I'm at. How many cards in Modern need to be banned? How many of the companion cards need to be banned before it just makes more sense to just get rid of the rule in 60 card formats?
One more.
You think 2?
No, I think if you literally ban, this is how I feel about it. I think if you literally get to a point where you feel the format is unhealthy enough that you have to ban Yorion, or you have to ban Kahira, either one, Gigantha, doesn't matter. If one of those proves that this is a lower power level, we established that this was not as problematic as Lurrus, so we left it on the table, and then over the course of several months, it creeps up and becomes the deck du jour and everyone's playing it, you get rid of them all. Because at that point, it's exactly the conversation we just had a second ago. If they cost 10 to put in your hand, it wouldn't matter. It just becomes a situation where slowly but surely we shift towards a world where they're always going to be on the table and they're always going to be the thing that decks just drift towards doing. And that's dumb. If that's how they work, then that's just not good. That's a stupid thing.
And I think I half agree with you. I think if they ban Yorion, I'm fine. I don't think you need to get rid of the companion mechanic. I think Yorion is a Lurrus comparable power level and has been in every format it's in. And I think that card is overtly powerful enough where, like, fine, right? That's not companion being a problem. That's just like Urion's very good and it uses the companion mechanic in a way that we've already proved is pushed over the edge. I think if they end up banning something like Zerda, I also don't think I would think you need to ban the companion mechanic, because I think like that happened in the same way that like Splinter Twin is banned, right? They accidentally printed a dumb card. It happens to combo with Zerda. Get rid of the companion over the combo piece. That's cool. Fine. Like those are corner cases to me where like the companion is more powerful than it needs to be. But if they need to ban Gigantha or Kahira, then that's when you need to get rid of the mechanic. When you ban the companions that people are just playing because they can, that just get rid of the mechanic. I think that it's that side of the aisle that I think, and I think that could be a problem, right? The other side of that is I think we're going to enter into a modern format by this summer where you see Gigantha, Kahira, or Urion in like 70% of decks. And the 30 that you're not seeing it are the ones that just like Urza decks that you get Urza, so you can't get those, or you're seeing Yawgmoth decks you just like can't play with those cards because the key card to that deck functioning has 2 pips and whatever. But other than those corner cases where decks are so powerful with an engine that specifically makes it so you can't play with those companions, I think you're going to see those companions everywhere.
I think so too. I mean, I will, like I said, my concern level is still at 4. So it's like, I don't feel like it's, overtly horrible. Like we're in DEF CON. I just think it's a consideration that we need to be mindful of. I think if you're asking me, do I think Ragavan or the rest of the companions are more of an issue right now? The answer is Ragavan. So like, let's, if we're being honest, where's my concern level on a scale of 1 to 10 for a rest of companions versus Ragavan? Ragavan's like a 7. Companion's like a 4.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's fair, right? Like that was, we did get compliments that we like after last week's episode came out a day after. People were like, we appreciate that you guys were just like super targeted that Lurrus is the problem and Ragavan or any other cards have a much longer way to go before they get banned. I still think Ragavan is fine. I think it's the Tarmogoyf of the format. I think that it's super fragile, and if you draw 2, it's bad, and all of the things that we've kind of talked about in the past. I think it sucks that it costs so much, right? I think one of like the main reason people are really spiteful about Ragavan is how expensive they are. I also want to see what the format looks like, right? And Lurrus was a big part of Ragavan being good. The fact that you could rebuy it every turn was a big strength to that card that now they don't have anymore. The fact that Ragavan also like ramped you into Lurrus also made the ramp you're getting into a pretty valuable resource that some of the more aggro decks don't need anymore. They don't have that late game that treasure matters for, and now they just are looking for card draw. So it'll be interesting to see how everything shakes out going forward. I do think I agree though that as the format currently stands, I would put the companion mechanic as more problematic to me still than Ragavan. I'm gonna.
You think it's a bigger concern, huh?
Yeah, I do. I think that like the fact that even with Lurrus, we were seeing almost exclusively companion decks. Like it was still a format that was 80% companion decks, and just some of them were playing one of the other ones that worked better with their strategy. To me, leans me towards, and I might be wrong. The fact that people aren't playing Lurrus means that more Stoneforge Mystics getting Batter Skulls and Cauldron Completes are going to be good, is going to be sweet. I'm really excited because I think I want to talk one thing about like some cards we think might see play or might not see play before we finish the episode. I want to wait till next week to talk towards like what the metagame has shaped out after that, because we don't know, right? We still, the ban announcement was made yesterday. This is before the weekend. We have I think 1 tournament total with the ban list being in place, and even then like the data we're seeing is pretty unreliable on like some of these lists literally have Lurrus in them as like a card that was played, so it's hard to tell like what's real. But I will say I do want to know what you think. What do you think is going to be, what cards and or decks do you think now have the potential to be good again with Lurrus gone?
I mean, there's a few things. I think like the Yawgmoth deck pokes through and comes to mind right off the bat. I think like that deck was already pretty good. I think that deck didn't benefit at all from playing Lurrus. It needs its namesake card that cost 4. So I think that's a deck that probably was already fringe really, really good. What else do I think is on the list of?
Yeah, I guess to start, I can read off. So these are the decks that were in the top of the modern metagame without Lurrus. It's Murktide Regent, the Yorion Black-White Blink decks, Amulet Titan, Azorius Control, the Cascade decks, both the Crashing Footfalls version as well as what they call Blue Living End, but the graveyard version, right? The Living End decks. Jun was playing Lurrus, sorry. Blue Living End, Yawgmoth, and that was the top of the tables, right? Those are all the decks that were like, we're not playing Lurrus, and we're the best. Now, the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's of the top 12, 5 of them were playing Lurrus, right? And then of those top 12, the top 25% of the metagame between Death Shadows and Hammer Time were Lurrus decks, right? That's why this Lurrus ban happened. But that's a pretty decent list of different decks to look at to kind of get started.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think like, and the funny thing is, most of the decks that were playing Lurrus that were good are still good without Lurrus, right? So it doesn't make much of a difference. It makes a small difference. I think like, I still think Death Shadow will be good. I think that takes, it's an impact. I mean, I saw plenty of Hammer Time lists that weren't playing Lurrus, so it's not even like that's like a thing that I think is that big of a deal. In fact, is there a deck that loses Lurrus here that you think goes away?
No.
Right?
Not one. I think like Hammer Time gets there are already decks that were playing Nettle Cyst instead, adding to it. Now they also get to play Cauldron Complete, so they get Nettle Cyst and Cauldron Complete added to the deck. You have Death Shadow that has survived so many other cards being banned. I think it's totally fine. It might not even change its list. I think honestly, the like joke with Kahira or Gigantha is that it just like gets it for free, right? Like literally the top list currently on MTG Goldfish for Death Shadow can just trade Lurrus for Gigantha and 0 cards change in the deck.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely. The 0 cards change in the deck. I think obviously Lurrus had a pretty particular effect on that deck, so it's not like, it doesn't change the play pattern.
I think they play some new cards that are more expensive, right? Like one of the big questions is like, does Street Wraith come back or do the Delve creatures come back, right? Do you start playing Angler again over Kroxa? I think Kroxa, like your creature package between Dragon Rage Channeler, Ragavan, and Kroxa is better than Tasigur and
I do think Prismatic Ending being in the format is an argument for wanting to play the more expensive creatures.
Yeah, but don't you just play your blue? Don't you just play
Murktide
Regent? Don't you play just Grixis Murktide?
Probably. Yeah, you're probably right. It's more powerful. It's like a way more powerful card than Gurmag Angler.
Yeah, I think the real argument is I think Murktide Regent just maybe is the better deck than Death Shadow now. I think that is, I don't think Death Shadow loses a lot, but I think the difference between it and Murktide Regent swings back towards Murktide Regent. And Death Shadow and Jund are going to have to figure out what their existent looks like and what is it better at capitalizing on those effects. I think Jund, that's the big question. Do I think Bloodbraid Elf is good enough in Modern now? No. I don't think Bloodbraid Elf.
We've come a long way.
Do I think Liliana of the Veil or Liliana, and this is what I said, we'll wait till later, Liliana of the Veil or Liliana the Last Hope has a chance to make a return? A lot of people are talking crap about Liliana of the Veil. Now, I do think a lot of them like haven't played with Liliana of the Veil, and like they're looking at Jund in the way that people classically look at Jund players, right? Like, I'm playing Jund, I've been playing Liliana of the Veil for the last 5 years. I don't care if this is good in the metagame. I've put all my money into this, $2,000 deck, and I'm just going to be jamming them regardless of metagame. And sometimes I'm going to do well because I'm good at it, right? That's like the view. It's kind of the Merfolk players. If Merfolk players had money, is like the joke, right? And Liliana of the Veil, people are like, kind of like, this card isn't good. I disagree with that as a Jund player, I guess, which maybe I'm just the problem. But I think that I think Liliana of the Veil is very powerful in some matchups, and especially if the blue-red decks are what kind of comes around. Liliana of the Veil is very good at killing Murktide Regents, while your other cards are good at killing all the other stuff.
I think your point too about Liliana of the Veil that is interesting, and I think that the people that call us boomers for being Liliana of the Veil are powerful.
Right.
The thing that they're wrong about is that the inevitability of that card is the same as it's always been, and the cost of that card and what makes that card unique and interesting is the same as it's always been. We didn't have a better Planeswalker printed for cheaper that allows us to discard cards profitably. We didn't have a better Planeswalker printed that allows us to edict and non-target. We didn't have we've had
and
other planeswalkers printed that are cool. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Ren and 6. I do think Lily of the Last Hope is good. I think some of the, like 3-mana Teferi is a great example of a card that's really powerful and doing something cool, but it's not like it's doing the same thing better. Liliana is still the best on its corner of the effect that it has. Is it one of the 2 best planeswalkers of all time anymore? No. Is it a top 10 planeswalker of all time? Absolutely.
Yeah, I would even maybe probably sit here and argue top 5, I think.
What's your go? Top 5 go.
No
order.
Oko is number 1.
You can give me no
number
order.
1. Ren 6 is number 2. 3 Fairy is number 3.
JTMS still has to be in there, right?
I mean, I've argued. Yeah, I guess Jace is number 4 and Liliana is 5.
Because like the other options that would be like creeping in on the territory, or like
5 mana Teferi,
Karn, 5 mana Teferi,
4 mana Karn, 7 mana Karn.
Right, I think so.
Yeah. So here's kind of my thought. Liliana of the Veil does really good work with Ren and 6. They're very powerful together. Like, and really? Ren and 6 isn't going anywhere. Ren and 6 is the card that helps you answer your problems like Dragon Rage Chandler and Ragavan. This format is not going to go away from having at least one deck, if not 2 decks, that are just trying to go all in on getting a Ragavan in play and me preventing you from getting around it. And Liliana of the Veil is a card that is good against those types of strategies that then whittles them down to not having anything. Jund is still good at grinding games out, and those 2 cards together are still very powerful. Is it as good as it used to be? No. Do I think you're playing like 2 of them and maybe it's 2 Liliana of the Veils and 1 Liliana of the Last Hope because Last Hope is so good at killing Ragavans? Probably. Hidetsugu consumes all. I do think that card is like just going to see a ton of play, but also is good with Liliana because Liliana then this like comes down, gets rid of all of those small creatures, and then Liliana sits there and just like eats the rest of the game up. And it's like the inevitability lock that she comes with that's so good. And that's why I don't agree with the like, and I'm fine. In 6 months, when Liliana of the Veil is not seeing play in Jund, I will eat a banana on camera. How about that?
Do you know what else is really good when you're draining your hand and artificially discarding and running out of cards? Having something you can pay 3 mana for to put in your hand to play. It's really good to be able to pay 3 mana from your sideboard to fill your hand with a card when you're out of cards because you've made you both discard and now you have access to an extra one.
Which card are you talking about, though?
I'm saying Liliana plays well with companions. I'm just saying in general, Liliana plays well with...
Well, but it hasn't, right? That's kind of one of the issues, is that right now, people haven't been playing Liliana of the Veil because there's not enough... Because it wasn't good with the companions that exist. It doesn't work with... It maybe like in the ones that it is good
just with. Like Jegantha? Like just like having like a Jund deck that plays Jegantha?
Jegantha's requirement has 2 black. Liliana can't be with the Jegantha. Like the free
you
ones,
can't have more than you a single mana pip in any.
Yeah.
You're right.
So I think a Yorion deck maybe. Well, and so that's something that's cool, right? I have an Esper Stoneblade list that's playing 3 Liliana of the Veils and that has been powerful. Like I was playing it with Lurrus in the format and doing well with it. So like I do think Liliana is better than people are giving it credit for. I mean, one thing that has been cool is that the Wanderer is seeing play, which is another good planeswalker that exists. But yeah, I think just like there's a bevy of 3-drop like Jund spells that Jund gets the upgrade to. I don't think it goes with the 4 mana. I think the Bloodbraid Elf is the one that just like loses its value. I think that if you look at the other, like I think Hammer Time is just as good, right? I think there's some weird decks. I think like Selesnya Life Gain maybe has the ability to come back. It was already starting to see more play and do well as like an alternative to Yawgmoth decks. And now that you're going to have less Lurrus decks in the format, you're maybe benefited by having this value train deck that has like X amount of 3-drops in it. Stuff like Ranger.
You think the Enchantress deck has made a lot? You think the Enchantress deck has made a lot worse?
I don't know.
I know not every version was playing Lurrus, but I know there was a version of that deck that was playing Lurrus that was like pretty good.
Well, there's the Hardened Scales decks, right? That were playing Lurrus. That might also have been taking a hit with Lurrus dying. It's like hard though, because like for a lot of these decks, it was just like, oh, if I get to the late game, this is an alternative option. That one is more important because it gets you the Walking Ballistas back. Yeah, it's hard. It's going to be really interesting to see. And that's why I didn't want to get too deep into like which decks come and go, because we can talk about that next week when we have some tournaments under the weekend's belt that we can talk towards after the ban comes into effect. But I did want to talk about like what cards we think are going to come back. Do we think Liliana of the Veil is just boomer talk and doesn't have a future anymore or has potential? to me, the hatred
our
of it
silly
feels like
11-year-old boomer magic.
Like we got a comment. I got a comment on TikTok yesterday, literally being like, "Do you think this is going to make Tarmogoyf good again?" And I was like, Tarmogoyf has seen 4 of play in a top 10 deck in the format this whole time.
Always.
It's been in Jund this whole time. It hasn't gone anywhere. People like kind of think Jund is always bad, and Jund is always in the top 10 decks in the format. And I think Liliana the Veil is part of that kind of belief system. And so I think people are underestimating her, and I think she has the potential to come back. Maybe not in full swing, but I definitely think she's a useful tool that fights against different parts of the format, right? Like it's good against stuff like Murktide Regent. Like Liliana the Veil, if you're able to get rid of, they have 12 creatures total, your deck has 20 pieces of removal spells, and if you're able to get Liliana the Veil down and then start having removal up to fight a Ragavan that's dashed or put a Tarmogoyf in front of her, she fights a lot. Ragavan's the big problem, right? Like Ragavan does fight against Liliana Veil uniquely well, but even if they do that, they don't get the draw. They don't get the card draw. They don't get the exile card from you. They don't get a treasure. So like they are sacrificing value by getting rid of your Liliana. So yeah, I go back and forth.
All right. Well, that's our boomer talk. It's our boomer Jund talk for the day.
Yeah, I do think like everyone just buy like 10 Murktide Regents like right now. It might be too late by the time this podcast episode has come up.
I think I have 2 or 3 of them from opening those cards last summer.
Yeah, I mean, it's already expensive, so it's not like a hot undervalued spec like some cards are, but that card is going to be one of the best cards in the format. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Murktide Regent is banned by the end of the year.
If it's the next one.
I don't know if it's the next one because like Ragavan exists, but like Murktide Regent has
like $20. It's like $20. It hasn't got out of hand yet.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Buy it now. Like, if you think the elementals are expensive.
Yeah, true.
All right. So that is it. Thank you so much to our patrons. If you like stuff like this, we did a whole extra piece of content that's up on Patreon right now, but came out a week early. You get this whole episode like as of. You would have not listened to the episode in regards to Lurrus being banned in the future. After Lurrus was already banned, you would have known. You would have been like, oh man, these guys called it, because you got it 5 days early, and the actual video version came up day of the ban on Monday. So the video version edited comes out a day early for patrons, and the audio only bonus content with an extra 15 minutes of content every week at the very beginning comes out every week. And you can just go listen to those now. And you can, even if you listen to this podcast, there's a whole conversation about the Batman movie and ranking all the different Batmans amongst each other and which is the best Batman and why Ben hasn't,
why it's not Lego
terrible
Batman.
Opinions on Lego Batman. He hasn't even finished it. And so make sure to check that out. Also big shout out to Ultra Pro for sponsoring this and our streams. They're super awesome. If you want really great product to be able to sleeve your cards, put your cards in deck boxes, make sure to check them out. Big shout out as well to TCG Player. Down below is a link to get affiliate code for Kess, or for the MMcast. Wrong, different pitches. The MMcast, that you can check all that stuff out, and it helps us definitely. And last but not least, Alter Sleeves. We're going to start coming out with some cool Patreon exclusive Alter Sleeves, probably starting in April. And we're really excited by that. But if you hit down to the right tier, you'll be able to get exclusive access to Patreon exclusive Alter Sleeves. So make sure to check that out as well. Anything else, Ben, to shout out before we're done?
No, that'll wrap us up here. It's a late one. I'm glad we got to cover this, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.